This is a personal share about my life and how family defines you in more ways than you can imagine. Even if you are thousands of miles away, your family patterns run most of your life. This is the story of how I found a way to become aware of these patterns and heal my relationship with my family. So let's dive in. I didn't grow up in a harmonious and loving home, not because my parents didn't love me or didn't do the best they could, because they did. There were a lot of good times, and my parents made sure to provide me with nice clothes, good food, great education, and after school activities. We went traveling, had nice vacations, and I had more opportunities than most kids around me. From the outside, it looked like a very good life. But inside, there was a lot of conflict. My parents argued and fought all the time. You see, my dad had a very strong character, to put it lightly, and he definitely has some anger issues, and he used to be very explosive. This put a big stamp on our relationship because I have a strong character too, so neither of us would give in. We would just keep fighting. My mom was a good homemaker for sure, but she didn't have much emotional warmth. Her mom was the same, of course. In the end, she succumbed to bipolar disorder, and this made her even more distant and disconnected. I was a nice, smart, obedient child during the first 7 years of my life. Then something happened, and I became angry, rebellious, and rule-breaking. I became a difficult child. For a long time, I didn't understand what happened to me, but I could feel strongly that there is something deeply wrong because I felt scared, confused, and angry all the time, and I was really, really miserable. Now, this is the hidden layer of the missing puzzle that I discovered many, many years later. As it turns out, for a while, when I was a child, my parents were swingers with another couple. No judgment on that, whatever floats your boat. But the man from the other couple had an eye for children too, and I happened to be at the right place at the right time, lucky for him, but very unfortunate for me, as you can imagine. The sexual abuse I went through from the age of 7 for a couple of years happened in my home in a family setting. Still nobody noticed. And I couldn't remember either till many, many years later. This time I'm not going to go into the details on how all this could stay hidden for so long, or about how it is possible to suppress something like this to amnesia for 30 years. In fact, this is not uncommon, and it has a very logical explanation. What matters is that my parents didn't know about this, they still don't, and my behavior that turned out to be a trauma response was met with strict boundaries and punishment every time I crossed the line. Of course, this made me equally mad and sad. I felt misunderstood, alone, and utterly abandoned while I lived in a pretty family home. I'm talking about this now not to lay blame on anyone, but to make it clear why I tried to cut cords with my family, why I started to move away from them, and eventually ended up on the other side of the planet. Even though at the time I didn't know exactly why, and I couldn't name what I felt inside, but it was clear to me that my home was not a safe place for me and my own sanity and well-being. I have to create some distance. When I turned 20 years old, my parents decided to move to our weekend home half an hour from the city where we lived and I grew up. I stayed in our city apartment with my younger sister because we both went to college and university. This was the first time in my life I felt a sense of relief and a little bit of independence and freedom. My father said that while I live under his roof, I have to obey his rules. Well, suffice to say, I couldn't wait to get out of under that roof. This half an hour distance from my parents and the place that was part of my home was the first healthy boundary that I ever experienced. But even though we didn't live under the same roof anymore, the family patterns of manipulation and control were still very present in my life. I think life has a way to help you to take the next step, and in my case, this meant putting more distance between me, my home, and my parents. While studying psychology, I started to realize that what's happening at home is not a healthy dynamic, to put it nicely. You know, when you are used to crossing of boundaries, when you learn that manipulation and conflict is the only way to resolve things, when anxiety is your constant companion, you don't even know that there is something wrong. You think this is how things are for everyone, that this is normal. I started to become aware what is trauma and psychological dysfunction, and believe me that it was a big eye-opener. Anyways, back to my story. I fell in love, and the guy in question lived in Ireland at the time, so we decided that I will move from Hungary to Ireland. This was decided in 3 days and done in 3 weeks. I know it sounds a little crazy, but it was the beginning of my own life, my own relationship, the way I wanted. At least that's what I thought at the time. Starting a new life in another country was not easy for me. And even though I wanted to get away from home, still I was scared to leave everything behind, everything I knew, my old familiar world. But I'm flexible and adapted quickly, and of course I was in love, so everything looked good. At the beginning, everything went so well, idyllic even. But after the honeymoon period, my relationship started to fall apart, then disintegrated, leaving me heartbroken and confused while I wondered, why is this happening to me again? Part of me was tempted to give in and go home like a loser, licking my wounds, but I decided to stay and restart my life, this time in a way that I wanted. This decision definitely helped me to become more independent and stand on my own 2 feet, and I gained a little bit of confidence. My relationship with my parents became less intense simply because I lived in another country, so we had way less contact, but when I visited home, somehow I would just fall back into the old patterns and behave like a little child who was there to please her parents. No matter how hard I tried to avoid it, we would always end up fighting. I kept building my therapy practice in Ireland, and I dove into healing and self-discovery to figure all this out. Then in 2012, I received an opportunity to participate in a program in Peru with a sacred plant called Ayahuasca. To be honest, I didn't even know what ayahuasca was at the time, but I felt such a deep calling in my heart that I knew I have to go there. This was my last resort. And so it was, I ended up being one of the 13 participants who were selected from more than 300 applicants. When I made this decision, something shifted in me, and I decided that I'm going to leave Ireland for good, go to Peru, do some travel, and find a new home. I thought I just need to trust, and the medicine is going to tell me the next step. I sold most of my belongings that I've accumulated over 6 years, and what was left I gifted away in a farewell party that I threw in the apartment where I lived for years. All I had left was 2 boxes of stuff that I felt attached to and had planned to return for. My parents, of course, didn't understand or agree with my decision. My dad is a logical person, so according to him, what's the point of going to Peru in the jungle, drinking some brew, why I can just stay where I am and live a normal life like others? And he was scared as well. What can happen to me, that I can die or my organs can be trafficked? Now I understand. At the time, I thought that my decision has nothing to do with him, but as it turned out, later, most of what I did for a long time, I did to oppose him and to show him that I can. What happened in Peru and how that changed the whole trajectory of my life will be shared in another episode, so let me just say that I went through a deep healing and a fundamental change of perspective as a result of my plant medicine work. The chronic pain that I was dealing with most of my life was mostly gone, and the anxiety was reduced greatly. All this allowed me to see myself and my family more clearly and gain deeper understanding. After Peru, I spent a long time in Costa Rica in the jungle with an intentional community, and here I was introduced deeper to the Red Road, the shamanic tradition of the Americas. I was hoping to get guidance where to go next, but I just felt deeply confused, so I decided to go home and try to figure out my next step. Spending 6 months in Hungary, even though I didn't stay with my parents, just made it clear to me that I don't want to be so close to them, so involved with them, because it's always the same story. My life doesn't make sense, I should do it in a different way, and they know how. I literally couldn't wait to get out of the country. Then suddenly an opportunity appeared to go to Mexico. A business coach that I work with in Ireland and become friends with moved to Mexico and suggested I come there. This was interesting because I only had a few things on my new home list, and these were fast internet, close to an international airport, Spanish-speaking, beach town, and no winter. Where I live now is exactly like that. So I packed all my stuff, which was basically a suitcase and a half, and I moved to Mexico thinking if this doesn't work out, I can always come back to Europe. In retrospect, I think this was more an escape than a free choice, and I definitely haven't thought it through. But this was one of my patterns, making impulsive and emotional decisions. When I arrived to Mexico, a small fishing village in the Caribbean, I was in a culture shock, even though I traveled around before a lot. The Latino culture is very different from what I got used to in Europe. Completely different way of thinking and living life. Most I came to love, and some still stay annoying even now. Shortly after I arrived to Mexico, my friend invited me to another ayahuasca ceremony. This was after many ceremonies I already did the previous year, because at the beginning I didn't understand that more is not always better. Anyways, we went to the ceremony, and a couple of days after, I had a complete collapse, a spiritual emergency, when I was overwhelmed with fear, and I thought I was gonna lose my mind. But more on this on another time. Thankfully, I had some help, and slowly I started to ground and stabilize after another dark night of the soul. Again, part of me wanted to run home, but it was the feeling of shame that made me stay and truly face myself. My life was in ruins, at least that's how I felt. I was so lonely in a different country, a different environment where I didn't speak the language. I had no job, no home, no friends or family, and all the money I had was $1,200 to start my amazing new life and finally prove to my father that I can. So I stayed in Mexico, and the beginning was really hard. After a year, I went home to visit my family, and this was not such a good idea. I wasn't in a good place for sure, and I spent the previous year with digging things up from the past so I can let go of that weight. Long story short, we had an epic fight with my father, not just me, but my mom and my sister too. And when I say fight, I mean my dad screaming at all of us like a crazy maniac who totally lost control, saying things that hurt more than a punch in the face. I am sure that some of you can relate. This was a wake-up call for me. That was a turning point in my life and in my relationship with my dad. I decided no more. And to make my point, I didn't talk to my dad for the next 2 years, and I didn't go home. I kept talking to my mom maybe once a month, but that was all. Even though this was painful to even consider cutting my dad out of my life, I was sure that I'm finished with allowing others abusing me, even my family and my dad. If we can't have a fairly decent relationship with basic respect, then I prefer no relationship at all. And I don't think that parenthood justifies abusing your child. And I'm not a child anymore. But you see, I was. Even when I was 30 years old, when my dad screamed at me, I regressed back to being 6 and stand there frozen, forgetting that I can leave, that I can say stop, no more. I thought all the inner work, all the moving away and creating a different life, and I come home and everything goes back to shit. Why is this happening? So I stayed in Mexico, started to build my life back up again from zero. This was another pattern of mine, by the way. I build something, then I walk away and start something completely different. I learned Spanish. I started working as a therapist for a yoga retreat center, and I started to create my therapy practice in Mexico. It took me 3 years to get out of that survival mode. Then things started to get a little easier and flow better. After 2 years, we started talking again with my dad. There was not a clear reconciliation per se, but we both understood that the new line was drawn, and we both tried to respect that. From this time on, my relationship with my dad and my mom improved a lot. I only visited every 2 years for a couple of weeks and never stayed at my parents' house. It was pretty peaceful, and everybody tried to put forward their best behavior. We even had a little bit of fun sometimes. I was content. I thought this is as good as it gets. I was grateful for ending the fight, and even though we were not super close, but at least the atmosphere wasn't so hostile. It was a big improvement compared to the past. Meanwhile, I was living my life in Mexico, growing my psychedelic therapy practice, and as I kept working with the mother ayahuasca. I changed a lot. My life changed a lot, but some things just kept persisting, like my relationship pattern with man, the game of push and pull we all know so well. Things starting out great, but quickly turning sour, picking the same type of man out of infinite possibilities. You know what I mean. But I was doing much better, my practice was growing, and I felt more centered than ever. Then again, shit hit the fan. I started with a nerve pain in my body that I never felt before. I couldn't sleep or move without the pain. I tried everything, but nothing relieved the pain in my shoulder that I felt. After a couple of weeks of not sleeping, I felt desperate. I didn't know what else to do. But it's true, if you search, you will find, and a friend of mine referred me to a therapist who did biodecoding. I had no idea what that was, but I was willing to try anything at that point, so I booked a session. Biodecoding is a consciousness-based healing modality integrating trauma-informed therapy, psychology, energy medicine, and modern neuroscience and ancestral healing wisdom. It looks at disease not as an enemy, but a doorway to awakening, to remembering that you are the creator of your life. The link between trauma and disease is well documented and proven by now. Biodecoding empowers you to overcome disease, resolve trauma, and powerfully transform your life by addressing the root causes of your problems in your family system, in your clan. I turned to biodecoding out of desperation. For my life, I couldn't understand how after 15 years of therapy, deep inner work, and walking on a spiritual path, I still repeated some same old patterns, like dramatic setbacks and financial loss in my work, or my romantic relationships, repeating the same story and attracting the same type of person with precision. My first biodecoding was intense but very rewarding, and after the first session I fell asleep and I slept for a day and a half. When I woke up, the pain was reduced about 30% in my shoulder. I was amazed and quickly signed up for my next session. In fact, I was so fascinated that I also signed up for the course to learn this method. Slowly it became clear to me that addressing my family as a whole was the missing link. You see, for years I kept working on myself, my childhood, my trauma, my patterns, and this was all useful and it helped a lot, but it didn't resolve all of my problems. Biodecoding works with your whole family system. It looks at the family as a biological organism trying to survive and keep the lineage alive. In the family system, everything is connected and you can't take one element out without addressing the whole system. One of the biggest things I learned was that most of my patterns, challenges, and limitations didn't start with me. I inherited them from my family. In fact, I look at my family system, I can see those patterns repeating across generations. I would have never thought that my grandfather being captured in the war had anything to do with my challenges in business, but it turned out that it had. I continued with my biodecoding for a year, and at the same time I was learning how to use this powerful tool and help others. Before, I thought going to the root of your problems means going back to your childhood and your birth experience, but I learned that it means going deep into your family structure. This work completely changed my life, my relationships, and my way of thinking. But the most important thing I realized was that I did nothing wrong. My behavior was mostly the repetition or rebellion against my family's patterns. In the end, I understood that leaving my family, my country, my roots, that trying to disconnect and run away from the source of my pain didn't work. Because the patterns are in you, and wherever you go, you take them with you. And we heal in relationships. The family is the source of our gifts and our pain too. Healing is complete when you are at peace with your family. It took me a long time, but finally I get it. If you feel ready to liberate yourself from the hidden patterns that secretly rule your life, I'm currently opening a 6 or 12 session biodecoding container for a small number of people who feel called to do this deep transformational work. Sessions take place once a month, allowing space for integration and nervous system recalibration between sessions. This work is not about a quick fix, it's about freedom. And it's not for everybody. It's for people already standing at the edge and ready to let go. If this is you, you are welcome to reach out and explore how this work can support you. Link in the description, and book a free consultation with me if you are interested. Looking forward to connect with you, and thank you for listening.